On the evening of May 23, 1999, inside the Kemper Arena in Kansas City, Missouri, a pre-recorded video played on the big screen for 16,000 wrestling fans. In it, a masked man in a blue cape rambled about how his opponent was making his blood boil. It was silly. It was campy. It was supposed to make people laugh. And while that video was playing, while every set of eyes in the building was fixed on that screen, a 34-year-old father of two was sitting in the rafters of that arena, 78 feet above the ring, strapped into a harness that was held together by a single clip. A clip designed not for suspending a human being in the air, but for releasing the mast of a sailboat. A clip that required only 6 pounds of pressure to open. This is the story of the final 48 hours of Owen Hart. Not just the fall itself, not just the mechanical failure, but the decisions, the circumstances, the conversations, and the quiet human moments that led up to one of the most devastating tragedies in the history of professional wrestling. Owen was born on May 7, 1965, in Calgary, Alberta, the youngest of 12 children born to Stu and Helen Hart. The Hart family is wrestling royalty. Stu Hart ran Stampede Wrestling, a promotion that became legendary for producing some of the toughest and most skilled wrestlers on the planet. All 8 of Stu's sons became professional wrestlers, and all 4 of his daughters married wrestlers. The Hart Dungeon, the basement of the family home where Stu trained wrestlers, is one of the most famous locations in wrestling history. It produced Bret Hart, the British Bulldog, Chris Jericho, Chris Benoit, and dozens of others. Owen was the baby of the family, the youngest of 12. And in a family full of tough guys, full of people who had been stretched and twisted and hardened in the Hart Dungeon, Owen was the one who stood apart. Not because he was the toughest, not because he was the biggest, but because he was, pound for pound, the most naturally gifted athlete the family had ever produced. Chris Jericho, who grew up in Winnipeg watching Stampede Wrestling, remembers the moment he first saw Owen perform. He saw a masked wrestler wearing the traditional Stampede tights, and then the guy did a bump flip that was so smooth, so effortless, so unlike anything Jericho had ever seen, that he immediately knew it was Owen Hart. That one moment, more than anything else, made Jericho want to become a wrestler. He wanted to work with Owen more than anyone else in the business. But Owen was not just extraordinary in the ring. He was special as a person. He was funny, not wrestling funny. Not the kind of funny where someone reads a script on camera and gets a laugh because the audience has been trained to respond. Owen was genuinely, deeply, effortlessly hilarious. He was the kind of person who could walk into a room full of exhausted, beaten-up wrestlers who had been on the road for 10 days straight, and within 5 minutes, every single one of them would be laughing. His practical jokes were legendary. He once convinced his father Stu that a phone call was coming from Reggie Parks, a famous belt maker, challenging Stu to a fight. The old man was ready to throw down before Owen finally broke character and everyone realized what was happening. Another time, when hogs were delivered to an arena for a hog pen match, Owen intercepted the wranglers and directed them to put the animals in Vince McMahon's office. The image of the chairman of the World Wrestling Federation trying to wrangle livestock out of his corporate headquarters is almost too perfect to be real. But that was Owen. He could find the absurd in anything, and he could make you see it too. But here is the thing about Owen Hart that matters most when we talk about his final days. He never wanted to be famous. He never wanted to be a star. He loved wrestling as a craft. He loved the athleticism of it. He loved the locker room brotherhood. But the lifestyle, the politics, the travel, the time away from his family, all of that ate at him. In an interview with Slam Wrestling just 5 months before his death, Owen laid it all out. He said that when his contract was up, he was done. He had been smart with his money. He was financially set. He had bought property on a lake. He wanted to devote his time to his family. He wanted to be a dad. That is the man we are talking about. A man who was counting the days until he could go home for good. A man who had one foot out the door. A man who was performing a gimmick he did not want to perform. Doing stunts he was not comfortable doing for a company whose creative direction made him deeply uneasy. And yet his in-ring resume was staggering. Owen was a 2-time WWE Intercontinental Champion, a 1-time European Champion, a 4-time Tag Team Champion, the 1994 King of the Ring. He had headlined 3 pay-per-view events. His opening match against Bret at WrestleMania 10 in 1994 is still considered one of the greatest matches in WrestleMania history. Jim Ross has called it one of his all-time favorites. The brotherly love between Owen and Bret was real, and Bret did not need to lose that match to establish his younger brother. He wanted to, because he knew what Owen was capable of, and he wanted the world to see it too. Owen was, by every measure, one of the most talented performers the WWE had ever employed. He could work any style. He could be a heel. He could be a babyface. He could make you hate him. He could make you love him. He could go move for move with the best technical wrestlers on the planet, and he could fly through the air with a grace that made it look like gravity was optional. He was 34 years old and he was nowhere near his prime. The best years of his career were still ahead of him. The dream matches that fans fantasized about, Owen versus Kurt Angle, Owen versus Eddie Guerrero, Owen versus Chris Jericho, were all within reach. The wrestling world did not know it yet, but they were about to lose a man whose greatest work had not even been done. And that brings us to the 48 hours before everything ended. In the days leading up to the Over the Edge pay-per-view on May 23, 1999, Owen Hart was home in Calgary with Martha and the kids. This was the rhythm of his life at that point. 10 days on the road followed by 3 days at home. 250 days a year away from his family. It was grinding him down. He had told Martha many times that he wanted out. That this was not the life he had envisioned for himself. That the wrestling business had changed in ways that made him uncomfortable. The Attitude Era was in full swing. The content was getting raunchier, more provocative, more extreme. Owen, who was a genuinely wholesome person, did not want to pretend to cheat on his wife for a storyline. He did not want to cut vulgar promos. He wanted to wrestle. The blue blazer gimmick was his compromise. After the Montreal Screwjob in November 1997, when Bret Hart was humiliated by Vince McMahon and left for WCW, Owen was in an impossible position. His brother had just been betrayed by the company Owen still worked for. Several members of the Hart Foundation followed Bret out the door. The Anvil left. Davey Boy Smith left. But Owen stayed. He had a contract. He had a family to support. And despite his personal feelings, he honored his obligations. But Vince Russo, the head writer at the time, did not know what to do with Owen. Russo did not think Owen was exciting enough as himself. He wanted to make him a superhero. So they dusted off the blue blazer, a gimmick Owen had used early in his career, and reimagined it as a comedic, self-righteous character. The blazer was supposed to be an over-the-top parody of the Attitude Era itself. A buffoonish goody two-shoes who looked ridiculous next to the edgy anti-heroes the audience actually wanted to see. Owen went along with it. Not because he loved it, but because he had already turned down several ideas he was uncomfortable with, and he did not want to be known as the guy who kept saying no. He did not want to be difficult. So he put on the mask, he put on the cape, and he agreed to do the entrance from the rafters. Now here is where the timeline of those final 48 hours becomes critical. At some point in the days before the pay-per-view, someone from the WWE called the Hart home. They needed Owen's measurements. They needed to fit him for a harness. Martha took the call. She asked them why they had not measured him earlier since Owen had just been on the road and was now home. The answer was alarming. The blue blazer entrance from the rafters had just been written in. It was a late addition to the show, and the WWE was going to use a new rigging system different from the one they had used before. This was not the first time Owen had been lowered from the ceiling. He had done a version of the stunt months earlier, before Survivor Series in 1998 on Sunday Night Heat. That time, he wore a standard full-body harness with a slow-release clip. It was the safe way to do it, the kind of setup that professional stunt coordinators use in movies and live shows. The problem, according to the people who made the decisions, was that it took too long to disengage. Owen would be dangling there for too long after he reached the ring. It looked bad on television. It made for what they called bad TV. So for Over the Edge, a different approach was chosen. Instead of the full-body harness with the locking mechanism, they would use a quick-release clip, a nautical snap shackle, the kind of device that is designed for one very specific purpose, to release a sailboat mast quickly under pressure. It was compact. It was fast. and it required only 6 pounds of force to open. The plan was elaborate. Owen, dressed in his full blue blazer costume, would be hooked to a cable in the rafters. He would be lowered toward the ring while the arena went dark and the pre-recorded video played. When he reached a point just above the ring, he would pretend to be tangled up in the harness. He would fumble with it, making it look like a comedic mishap. Then he would release the quick-release clip himself and fall the remaining few feet to the mat, landing on his face for a laugh. It was physical comedy, a pratfall from 10 feet up, the kind of thing Owen could absolutely pull off given his incredible athleticism. But to make that pratfall work, the release mechanism had to be easy to trigger. No complicated safety locks, no redundant backup systems. Just a simple clip that could be popped with minimal effort. And that is where the engineering met the reality of gravity and everything fell apart. It is alleged that several professional stunt coordinators were approached to rig the system. All but one refused. They looked at the setup and they called it crazy. The clip that was designed to drop a sail was now being asked to suspend a 227-pound man 78 feet in the air, with no backup, no safety net, and no redundancy of any kind. One expert who later examined the setup said he would never use that type of quick release as the sole means of suspending a person more than 10 to 12 feet off the ground. His first choice would have been a locking carabiner, the kind used in mountain climbing. His second choice would have been a 3-ring release, the type used in parachutes, which requires a deliberate and distinct movement to activate and cannot be accidentally triggered. The snap shackle was his absolute last resort, and even then, only with additional safety measures in place. The WWE did not use a locking carabiner. They did not use a 3-ring release. They did not use additional safety measures. They used the snap shackle. Just the snap shackle. 6 pounds of pressure between Owen Hart and a 78-foot fall. The morning of May 23, 1999. Owen Hart is at home in Calgary. This is his last morning, his last breakfast with his family, his last time walking through the front door. According to what was later revealed in the Dark Side of the Ring documentary, Owen's son Oje remembers something unusual about that morning. Before leaving for the airport, Owen pulled his 7-year-old son aside and told him firmly to take care of his mother and his sister. It was not the kind of thing Owen normally said on his way out the door. It was not a casual goodbye. It had weight to it. It had gravity. Whether Owen had a premonition or whether he was simply feeling the stress of what he was about to do, we will never know. But his son remembered it. Oje remembered his father's words and the seriousness in his voice, and he carried that memory with him forever. Owen flew to Kansas City. He arrived at Kemper Arena. And according to Jim Ross, who saw him backstage before the show, something was off. Owen was not himself. He was not cracking jokes. He was not pulling pranks. He was not doing the things that made Owen Owen. Jim Ross later described Owen's demeanor as noticeably different. He was either getting in the zone for the stunt, or he was feeling completely uneasy about it. Ross could not tell which one it was, but he knew something was wrong. The pay-per-view was set to begin at 7 o'clock Central Time. The card was stacked. Stone Cold Steve Austin was defending the WWE Championship against The Undertaker in the main event, with Vince and Shane McMahon as guest referees. The Rock was facing Triple H. It was the height of the Attitude Era. Business was booming. The arenas were full. The ratings were through the roof. And Owen Hart's Intercontinental Championship match against The Godfather was slotted somewhere in the middle of the card. Before the show, Owen met with referee Jimmy Korderas to go over the match. Korderas was scheduled to officiate the Blue Blazer versus Godfather bout. They discussed the spots. They talked about the finish. Owen was supposed to win the Intercontinental Championship for a 3rd time that night. It was going to be a good night for him professionally. A championship win. A memorable entrance. The kind of moment that gets replayed on highlight reels for years. As the show progressed, Owen made his way up to the rafters, 78 feet above the ring, in the dark, in a cape and a mask, hooked to a cable by a snap shackle that could be opened with the force of a firm handshake. Below him, the arena was buzzing. A hardcore match had just taken place, and there was debris scattered across the ring. Chairs, trash. The remnants of organized chaos that the Attitude Era audience had come to expect. The ring crew scrambled to clean it up before Owen's entrance. A pre-recorded video began to play on the big screen. Owen, in character as the Blue Blazer, ranting about the Godfather. It was funny. It was intentionally over the top. The fans watched and laughed. The cameras were focused on the screen. No one was looking up. And then something happened in the rafters. No one knows exactly what triggered it. Whether Owen shifted his weight, whether the cable moved, whether the clip simply could not hold. But the snap shackle released, and Owen Hart began to fall. 78 feet, straight down, in the dark. Referee Jimmy Corderas was standing in the ring, waiting for Owen's entrance. He was holding the top rope, looking up, when he heard something. A scream. He felt something brush against his head and his shoulder. The top rope was ripped out of his hand with tremendous force, jamming his fingers. He thought someone had dropped something from above. And then, he turned around. Owen was lying in the ring, face up, near the turnbuckle. He had landed chest first on the top rope and bounced into the ring. The impact was catastrophic. Corderas did not immediately understand what had happened. It took his brain a moment to process the image in front of him. And then the horror set in, and he began screaming for help. Jerry Lawler, sitting at the announce table just feet from the ring, saw it happen. He jumped up and ran to the ring. He looked down at Owen, and the color drained from his face. He went back to his headset and told the viewers at home that it did not look good at all. Jim Ross, sitting next to him, had not seen the fall itself. Lawler had nudged him, and Ross caught the tail end of Owen's body in free fall. Ross saw the impact. He saw the way Owen hit, and he knew immediately that this was not part of the show. Within seconds, EMTs and paramedics were rushing to the ring. They worked on Owen right there on the mat, in front of 16,000 people who had no idea what was happening. Some fans thought it was part of the show. Some thought it was a new storyline. Wrestling had blurred the lines between reality and fiction so many times that the audience could not tell the difference anymore. And that was part of the tragedy. The Rock was backstage when word spread. He wanted to go out to the ring immediately, but Vince McMahon told him to wait. McMahon was afraid the crowd would react to The Rock and think the whole thing was a work. So The Rock waited by the curtain, helpless, anxious, watching as they wheeled Owen through on a stretcher. One of the EMTs was still straddling Owen, pumping his chest, desperately administering CPR. The Rock walked alongside the stretcher and said a prayer. He helped load Owen into the ambulance. He climbed into the passenger seat. He looked in the back where they were still working furiously, and he kept praying. Owen was taken to Truman Medical Center. He was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The cause of death was internal bleeding from blunt force trauma to the chest. His aorta had been severed on impact. There was nothing anyone could have done. He was almost certainly dead before he hit the mat. Back at Kemper Arena, the show stopped. For 15 minutes. 15 minutes while Vince McMahon and the other corporate officials decided what to do. And then they made the decision that would haunt the company forever. They decided to continue the show. The reasoning, such as it was, followed a grim logic that exists in show business. The show must go on. Brian Pillman, a close friend of the Hart family, had died just hours before the Bad Blood pay-per-view in 1997, and that show had continued. Both Bret and Owen had wrestled on it. There was precedent. And so the show went on. Martha Hart would later describe the decision in the starkest possible terms. She said that Vince just discarded Owen like a piece of garbage, that they scraped his dead body off the mat and sent wrestlers out to wrestle on a ring where Owen's blood was still visible. She said the police should have stopped the show, and she was not wrong. The ring was, by any reasonable definition, a crime scene, or at the very least, the scene of a fatal accident. There should have been an investigation before anyone touched anything. Instead, the ring crew mopped up what they could and the next match started. Eric Francis, a columnist for the Calgary Sun, called McMahon's decision sick, disrespectful, and wrong. Ralph Klein, the premier of Alberta at the time, expressed hope that Owen's death would lead to changes in wrestling. Bret Hart, writing in his own column for the Calgary Sun a week later, blamed Vince McMahon directly for his brother's death. He questioned whether the stunt was really necessary. He called the tribute show that aired the following night something that reeked of disrespect. He pointed out the obscenity of a memorial where, afterward, wrestlers pointed to their crotches and yelled their catchphrases. It made him nauseous. Even fans who were in attendance were horrified. One man who left the event with his children after learning Owen had died said it was disgusting. He said that for kids to see that, for this to be so-called family entertainment, for them to just carry on as if nothing had happened, was just sad. The remaining matches were performed on a ring that still had Owen's blood on it. The wrestlers went out there, somber and shaken, and they performed. Some of them were crying. Some of them did not even know what had happened, only that something terrible had occurred. And in the main event, The Undertaker defeated Stone Cold Steve Austin for the WWE Championship in a match that no one involved wanted to have. An hour after the event restarted, Jim Ross was given the worst assignment of his career. Kevin Dunn, the television producer, told Ross through his headset that Owen had died. He gave Ross approximately 10 seconds to prepare. And then Jim Ross, live on pay-per-view, had to tell the world. He said that something had gone terribly wrong, that this was not a part of the entertainment, that this was as real could be. And then he said the words that no one who heard them will ever forget. He said that Owen Hart had tragically died from that accident. The fans in the arena were never told. They did not hear the announcement. They did not know, as they filed out of Kemper Arena that night, that they had just witnessed a man die. Some of them would not find out until they got home and turned on the news. Some of them would not find out until the next morning. In Calgary, Martha Hart received a phone call. It was Vince McMahon. He told her there had been an accident. Martha's first reaction was disbelief. Owen was the greatest prankster she had ever known. She thought it was a rib. She thought Owen was putting someone up to this. She asked to speak to him. And then McMahon had a doctor get on the line. The doctor told Martha that Owen was dead. Martha began screaming. She collapsed. 7-year-old Oje, who was still awake, heard his mother's screams and knew that something terrible had happened. He did not know the specifics. He did not need to. The sound of his mother's anguish told him everything. Bret Hart, Owen's older brother, was on a plane. He was flying to Los Angeles to appear on The Jay Leno Show. He found out about Owen's death while he was in the air. He would later say that, "You never want to find out about a tragedy on an airplane. There is nowhere to go. There is no one to hold. There is nothing you can do except sit there and feel the entire world collapse around you while strangers eat peanuts and watch the in-flight movie." The next night, May 24th, the WWE presented a tribute show. Raw is War became Raw is Owen. It was broadcast live from the Kiel Center in St. Louis. For 2 hours, wrestlers shared their memories of Owen. They told stories. They fought back tears. They tried to put into words what this man had meant to them. Mark Henry broke down. Jeff Jarrett, Owen's tag team partner who had been with him just hours before the accident, could barely speak. Triple H talked about Owen's legendary sense of humor. The entire locker room was in pieces. These were men who had been taught their entire careers to separate the real from the fictional, to keep their emotions in check, to never break character. And every single one of them was shattered. The show scored a 7.2 Nielsen rating, making it the highest-rated special episode in the history of Raw. Millions of people tuned in to say goodbye to a man they had never met but felt like they knew. The following week, Jeff Jarrett defeated The Godfather to win the WWE Intercontinental Championship, the title Owen had been booked to win at Over the Edge. When Jarrett won, he screamed Owen's name. It was the only way he knew to honor his friend and tag team partner. That belt was supposed to be Owen's. That moment was supposed to belong to him. 5 months later, in October 1999, Bret Hart returned to the Kemper Arena in Kansas City for WCW Monday Nitro. He faced Chris Benoit in a match dedicated to Owen's memory. The same arena, the same rafters overhead, the same ring, or close enough. Bret walked into that building knowing what had happened to his little brother in that very spot just months before. And he wrestled. Because that is what Harts do. They wrestle through the pain. They always have. On May 31st, 8 days after his death, Owen Hart was laid to rest in Calgary. The funeral was held at a local funeral home, and it was attended by more than 300 wrestlers, along with family members and friends. The crowd was so large that the eulogy had to be played through loudspeakers outside the building, where fans lined the streets with posters and cards, many of them young people who had grown up watching Owen on television every Saturday. Martha Hart stood in front of her husband's casket and felt something inside her break. She later told interviewers that she was horrified by what she saw, that she tried to run away, that Bret had to physically hold her, had to put his arms around her and inch her forward step by step until she could stand there and say goodbye. Owen was buried in Queen's Park Cemetery in Calgary. He was 34 years old. In the weeks and months that followed, the questions came fast and hard. Why was a nautical clip used instead of proper climbing equipment? Why were professional stunt coordinators who refused the job replaced with someone who allegedly exaggerated his qualifications? Why was there no safety net? Why was there no backup system? Why was a man suspended 78 feet in the air by a device that could be triggered by 6 pounds of pressure? Why did the show continue after a man died in the ring? Why did the Kansas City authorities not stop the event? Why was the ring, which was now a potential crime scene, allowed to be used for the remaining matches? Martha Hart wanted answers. 3 weeks after Owen's funeral, she filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the WWE. She claimed that the harness system was defective, that the stunt was poorly planned, that the company had been negligent in its duty to protect one of its performers. She was not doing it for the money. She wanted accountability. She wanted the truth. She wanted to make sure that what happened to Owen could never happen to anyone else. Vince McMahon countersued. He attempted to have the case moved to Connecticut, where punitive damages could not be awarded. He began reaching out to members of the Hart family. According to Martha, some members of the family actively worked against her, taking legal documents and providing them to the defense. The family that wrestling had built was tearing itself apart in the wake of Owen's death. After more than a year and a half of legal battles, the case was settled in November 2000. The WWE paid Owen's estate $18 million. There was no admission of wrongdoing. There was no trial. There was no public accounting of exactly what went wrong and who was responsible. The truth that Martha had been seeking was buried under a settlement agreement. Martha used some of the money to establish the Owen Hart Foundation, a charitable organization that funds scholarships and supports housing initiatives. She raised her children away from the wrestling business. She kept them grounded. She made sure they knew their father not as a character on television, but as a real man who loved them. She protected Owen's legacy fiercely. She refused to allow the WWE to use Owen's image or likeness. She refused to allow him to be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. To many wrestling fans, this was controversial. They wanted to celebrate Owen. They wanted to honor his career. They could not understand why his own wife would prevent that. And some members of the Hart family did not understand either. The rift that Owen's death created within the family deepened over the years. Some felt Martha was being selfish. Some felt she was denying Owen the recognition he deserved. The family that had once been the most famous dynasty in wrestling was fractured beyond repair. Brothers and sisters stopped speaking. Lawsuits were filed. Accusations flew back and forth. The Montreal screwjob had started the cracks. Owen's death blew them wide open. But Martha understood something that the fans and even some of the family did not. She understood that the company that killed her husband did not get to profit from his memory. She understood that a Hall of Fame induction was not about honoring Owen. It was about content. It was about a television special. It was about selling the network. And she was not going to let the man she loved be reduced to a marketing opportunity by the people who had failed to keep him safe. In 2020, Martha participated in the Dark Side of the Ring documentary about Owen's final days. For the first time, she showed the public the actual harness clip that had failed. She showed police photos from the rafters where Owen had been positioned. She showed close-up images of Owen's blood still visible on the ring. She let her children, Oje and Athena, speak publicly about their father for the first time. Oje, who had grown up to become a human rights lawyer, spoke about Owen not as a wrestler but as a dad. Athena, who was pursuing journalism, talked about the man she barely got to know. Jim Cornette, the legendary manager and promoter, wept on camera when he talked about the decision to continue the show after Owen's fall. Jim Ross called it the worst moment of his wrestling career, maybe the worst moment of his life. Jimmy Corderas, the referee who had been standing in the ring when Owen fell, described the sound of the impact and the sight of Owen lying face up on the mat, taking his last breaths, just a few feet from where Corderas had been standing. And then Cornette revealed something that crystallized who Owen Hart really was, even more than the jokes, even more than the matches, even more than the championships. Cornette said that according to everyone who was there, the very last thing Owen yelled as he was falling, the last words out of his mouth as he plummeted 78 feet through the darkness toward the ring below, was a warning. He yelled for Corderas to get out of the way. Think about that for a moment. A man is falling to his death. He has maybe 2 seconds of consciousness left. Every survival instinct in his body should be focused on saving himself, on reaching for something, on bracing for impact, on anything that might give him a chance. But Owen Hart, in the final seconds of his life, was thinking about someone else. He saw the referee below him. He saw his friend. And his last act on this earth was to scream a warning so that his friend would not be hurt. That is who Owen Hart was. That is the man who was taken from his family, from his friends, from the millions of people who loved watching him perform. Not the Blue Blazer, not the King of Hearts, not the 1994 King of the Ring, not the Intercontinental Champion or the Tag Team Champion or the guy who had the greatest opening match in WrestleMania history against his own brother. Just Owen, a husband, a father, a friend, a man who, even in the very last moment of his life, cared more about the people around him than he did about himself. The wrestling business has changed since 1999. Safety standards are different now. Stunts are regulated more carefully. The kind of rigging that killed Owen Hart would never be approved today, and that is in large part because of what happened at Kemper Arena. Owen's death was a wake-up call. It forced the industry to confront the reality that the people who perform in that ring are not invincible, that the line between entertainment and tragedy is thinner than anyone wants to admit, that when you ask a man to hang from the ceiling of an arena by a sailboat clip, eventually gravity is going to win. But none of that brings Owen back. None of that gives Oje back the father who told him to take care of his mother and sister on the last morning of his life. None of that gives Athena back the dad she was too young to truly remember. None of that gives Martha back the man she married when they were barely more than kids, the man who made her laugh, the man who wanted nothing more than to come home and stay home. Owen Hart did not want to be in that arena on the night of May 23, 1999. He did not want to wear that costume. He did not want to be suspended from those rafters. He wanted to be at his lake house. He wanted to be playing with his kids. He wanted to be done. He was 34 years old. He was 5 months away from the end of his contract. 5 months away from freedom. 5 months away from the life he had been planning and saving for. 5 months away from being just a dad. He never made it. The Kemper Arena in Kansas City has been renamed and renovated. It is now called Hy-Vee Arena, converted into a youth sports complex. The building where Owen Hart took his last breath still stands, but it is no longer the arena it was that night. The rafters he fell from still hold up the same roof, but the wrestling ring is gone. The name is gone. The arena as it existed on the night of May 23, 1999 is gone. But Owen Hart has not been erased. His family made sure of that. Not through a Hall of Fame ceremony, not through a highlight reel, not through merchandise or branding or any of the machinery that professional wrestling uses to package and sell its history. Through a foundation that gives scholarships to kids who need help. Through a son who fights for human rights. Through a daughter who tells stories. Through a wife who refused to let the people who killed her husband control the way he was remembered. In 2021, more than 2 decades after Owen's death, Martha Hart made a decision that surprised the wrestling world. She partnered with All Elite Wrestling, a company that had not existed when Owen was alive, to create the Owen Hart Cup tournament. It was a way to honor Owen on Martha's terms, not through the company that had failed him, not through the machine that had turned his death into a line item on a legal settlement, through a new organization with a new trophy called simply The Owen, and with all profits going to the Owen Hart Foundation. It was not the Hall of Fame that fans had wanted. It was something better. It was something real. Kevin Owens, the WWE wrestler, named his son after Owen Hart and incorporated the name into his own ring name as a tribute. Wrestlers across every promotion, from AEW to independent shows in high school gyms, cite Owen as an influence. His matches are studied by young performers who were not even born when he died. His comedy timing is referenced by entertainers who have no connection to wrestling whatsoever. His legacy lives in 1,000 places that have nothing to do with a company or a Hall of Fame or a highlight package. Owen Hart is not a tragedy. He is not a cautionary tale. He is not a footnote in the history of the Monday Night Wars. He was a man who made people laugh, a man who made people cheer, a man who loved his wife and his children more than anything in the world, a man whose very last words were a warning to protect someone else. And if that is not worthy of being remembered, then nothing is. Like and subscribe for more stories from the world of professional wrestling. And the next time you watch a match, the next time a wrestler does something incredible and makes it look easy, remember Owen. Remember that every single one of those performers is someone's husband, someone's wife, someone's father, someone's mother. Remember that the line between entertainment and real life is not as thick as we want it to be. And remember that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is not a move from the top rope or a dive through a table. Sometimes the bravest thing is yelling a warning to a friend when you know you cannot save yourself. Rest in peace, Owen James Hart. May 7th, 1965 to May 23rd, 1999. The world got 34 years with you. It was not enough. It was never going to be enough. Until next time.